Okay, everybody, welcome to the Integrated Athlete Podcast. Today, we've got our first guest, a very special guest. We have Shihan Peter Volke, and Shihan Peter is the chairman and the country representative for Australia in the style of karate that I practice, which is Kyokushin Karate. He's the seventh dan in this style. He is committed over 50 years of his life to the practice of martial arts and over 50 years in Kyokushin Karate itself, which is super impressive feat. He's also a very inspiring person to be around and a very inspiring person to be taught by and to feel his energy and the fact that he really lives the martial arts practice. So welcome, Shihan Peter, and how are you going today?
First, good morning, Daniel. I'm going really well. It's a couple of little technical hitches there with our speaker system, but that's okay. So
Awesome.
Look, it's lovely to be here on your first podcast, and it's great that you're showing enough passion about the style to explore this type of venue.
Awesome. So I really want to thank you for your time, and to get someone of your caliber and your level of expertise on here is just super amazing, and it's something that I'm really looking forward to. So just to begin with, Shihan Peter, if you could give people just a bit of a background about yourself, what was life like growing up for you? What were the kind of formative forces on you from a young age, and what really kind of got you or attracted you into martial arts?
Okay. Well, I guess the formative years for me were when I emigrated to Australia. A lot of people from my generation came to Australia my parents did, I guess, to start a new life here. So it was culturally a pretty massive sort of a change. I grew up in Germany, spent the first 6 years of my life there, and I was a city person. So coming to Australia had some pretty profound influences on me. As much as relating to the martial arts, this was a time when I guess the world war, Second World War, was still in people's minds to some extent, and Germans and Italian immigrants at that time were not always favourably looked upon. So I guess I experienced what a lot of immigrants, even these days to some extent, experienced, that there was a bit of discrimination in some effects. I don't like to necessarily use that term, but the long and short of it was that both my younger brother and I got into a lot of fights from day one onward, and that sort of has a roll-on effect in what you consider important in your life. And certainly from that stage onward, we both considered self-protection an essential part of life growing up. And so in my formative years, that would have had a pretty profound effect on me as well. My genetic father was also a boxing champion, so that would have, I guess, put some genetic predisposition into me in terms of what I was, I guess, connecting with on some level. But what attracted me to the Japanese martial arts specifically was in my young years, I remember watching a program called The Samurai, which was a story about a wandering samurai and, fighting ninja and that type of thing. And as a young kid, I found that super fascinating because they could do all these magic things like jumping on and off trees and on and off buildings, and the Japanese system of fighting, both armed and unarmed, was very exciting to us. We used to jump off trees when we were kids and pretend we could all do this sort of thing. And at about 13 or 14 years of age, I started practicing judo, which was the first martial art I actually come into contact with. We also had a boxing club, but judo, because it was Oriental, attracted my attention first, and I think that was a very good grounding, because it's sort of the grappling aspect has always had a lasting effect on me, and I found it interesting and enjoyable. But a friend of mine who I trained with at judo club told me about a new martial art called karate that was, starting off in a jiu-jitsu school in town. And first lesson there, I was hopelessly hooked, much to the dismay of my initial instructors, because I was tall and uncoordinated and just a horror to teach, but absolutely loved it with a passion, and have continued ever since. So, 50-something years later, I'm still passionate about it, still a hopeless addict. Body's not the same anymore, but the passion, if anything, has increased. Perhaps the emphasis has modified somewhat, but the passion and the love for it, and the love for the people involved in it, I guess, is still very, very strong.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Really great to hear that bit of your backstory as well. So what would you say, potentially, what are some of the career highlights for you in your martial arts journey? And also maybe on that as well, after that question's answered, what do you really think it takes from someone to become a really top level, world-class martial artist of any kind? And what sort of qualities do you really believe that this person or anyone aiming for the highest level needs to really embody?
Okay, highlights, like many people have been around for a while. The biggest highlight, I think, hands down, would have been the getting of my Shodan. It's something that stays with you forever, and it's definitely a highlight. Back when I got it, I thought, I was the ant's pants, but after a while, you realise you're starting to just scratch the surface. And back in those days, it was a fairly big deal. I mean, if you were a green belt back in the early to mid 70s, you were considered fairly competent, and I guess you were. I still think these days that if you can make it to green belt, you have the attributes to get a black belt. Just a matter of perseverance to move on from there. But so definitely in terms of gradings, my biggest highlights were my Shodan and probably Sandan as well. Sandan, I was at an age where I was fairly strong, but I remember being pushed particularly hard. A lot of the fighters I met in that grading were, as was habit, very fresh. I had a particularly hard grading, as I should have at that age, mind you. I'm not complaining, I'm just stating what it was. And by the time I got to the fighting aspect, there wasn't a whole lot left in the tank, despite training very hard for it. I don't think I ever paced myself as such, which I'm not sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but from yo to go, I sort of put in 100%. And I was quite confident that because I had trained so hard, that would see me through. But my first two fights, as was common in those, my first two gradings, Shodan and Nidan, as was common in those times, was 40 fights. For my third Dan, I think I had 13 fights rather than the traditional 40 I had in the other gradings, but they were of a much higher caliber and much more intensive. I spent a lot of the time getting up off the floor. A lot of my contemporaries at that stage thought this was just a brilliant opportunity to get me when I was knackered, and they took full advantage of that. And God bless their hearts, they made me earn every little bit there. But looking back, I really appreciate that, and it is how it should have been. I think the gradings are very much a personal thing, and there will be different emphasis placed on that. So while a lot of people pay particular attention and emphasis on numbers of fights, my feeling since that particular grading has been that it is the quality of the fights themselves and the test that applies to you as an individual that is the important part. So, some people still say these days, well, we do 40 fights. How come you guys only do 10? I can say with complete honesty that 10 fights are a very good test if they applied in such a way that they push you all along. So that if you're fighting 10 fights with your peers, which are people with similar abilities to you, but they're fresh, but they're pushing you just below tournament level, it to me was a harder test than the 240 fight gradings I experienced for Shodan and Needed. So I'm a big fan of that system, the long and short of it goes. Later on in life, I remember meeting Mas Oyama had a big effect on me. He had a presence or an aura. Like he was a sort of man that you meet, he walks into a room and you immediately notice his presence. And this is not something that you're necessarily born with. It's something that's developed with you over time. And after having lived a life that is like the forging of a sword, like a forging of a good sword. That's the impression, I guess, that he left with me. He left the impression of somebody that had done many things to turn him into the person that he was. And what he was very impressive when you met him. He just had this aura about him, which I found just amazing. He was physically imposing, although not tall. He was physically imposing in terms of the way he was built, but more his aura, I think, and the presence that he left in the room was the thing that I noticed most. So that was definitely a highlight. Personal highlights, I guess, that I found difficult. I had the privilege of judging and refereeing in the World Tournament, and for a period of roughly 14 years, I guess, I had the privilege of judging in the finals and refereeing in the semi-finals, and that, especially refereeing, brought a whole new world of pressure into my life. I would say that I found that initially more difficult than fighting in a tournament. Just the nerve part of it, knowing that you were responsible for making or partly making a decision at such an event, and also being in front of so many people who not always kindly judging you. So the initial part of that I found quite challenging. After a while, I found my feet and just enjoyed the process immensely. But again, it had a definite effect on me. In as much as being a world-class martial artist, I don't know if I'm really qualified to answer that, because there's some implication there that I fit into that mold. I don't know that I do. I have my strengths, and like everybody, I have things I'm still working on. But I guess to be good at anything, you need passion, for sure. You've got to want to do it, and you've got to want it really, really bad, because there's some days that are going to wipe the floor with you. and you've got to get up over those days. And it can be a physical thing, it can be a mental thing, it can be an emotional thing, but it's a personal journey for all of us. You've got to have discipline for sure, Sometimes you get up and you just can't be bothered, but you have to be bothered. So you have to have that internal strength and discipline, strength of character to do what's required, the training or the stretching or whatever it is, or the study, my early days going for senior grades were a little bit different in that I had nobody to teach me. So my kata were learnt from books. And you need a certain amount of discipline to stand there and work your way through that, as well as practice it and not give up. It's not just a matter of signing up to a dojo. There was nobody there locally for me to learn from. After my instructor retired, I was it, and there was nobody else to show me. So those types of things also require a little bit of experimentation and discipline and commitment. And I think the most important part really is self-belief. Believe that you're a strong, sovereign, capable being that can accomplish everything that they need to accomplish. And this is something I really try and instill in my students, have that self-belief, just tell yourself and believe in yourself that you can do it. This is essential, Too many people, I'm not sure, I won't say they necessarily have a victim mentality, but they tell themselves the world's dealt them a bad hand. Well, you create that reality by believing it, Create your own reality. Believe in yourself and you'll get there, whatever it is, I'm not saying it's going to be easy, and I'm not saying it's going to happen the first time you try it, but believe in yourself enough to give it a fair dinkum go. I think that's really, really important. If you have that self-belief and discipline, you'll accomplish miracles. You really will.
I think that's there's some really powerful points that you just made there. I think really that level of self-belief, like you're talking about, as you stated, that belief in ourselves or lack of can really make or break us. And, the body really just responds to whatever the mind is telling it, right? So some really powerful points that you made there. Sort of just moving, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but what do you believe some of the most powerful lessons are that the martial arts can teach people?
Okay, some of the most powerful things, well, I guess I mentioned self-belief. Balance is also an important thing. Like the martial arts are all about balance. It's a balance between hard and soft, male and female. And this is not just the theme for the martial arts. It's a theme for life and it's a theme for the universe. But martial arts, the yin and the yang, or the hard and the soft, it's out there. A good dojo will have a good balance with that. I think you've got to learn that your mind is the master, and you're the mentor of your body, and you're the mentor of your life. So when you pick a direction, you've got to make sure it's balanced. So it's great to be a good tournament fighter, but there's more to being a good martial artist and being able to fight in a tournament and being physically strong and fast. So this will be your reality for a certain period of your life. There will come a stage in your life where you've trained really hard, your body's flexible, you have good determination, you have good skills in fighting, and you have a high level of confidence, but some of these attributes will wane over a period of time. So you've got to ensure that your martial arts journey and your martial arts skill are relevant to your life as well. So even in the fighting part, if you look at the fighting part, yes, there's a hard system. You push it. Well, I pushed a lot of weights. I did a lot of bag work. I did a lot of sparring, but you also need to stretch. You need to watch your breathing, which is the softer part, so you don't tank out too fast. You have to have a concept of energy systems throughout your body and how they relate. One of the really good learning experience for me was training with a Tai Chi master. Now, I had a son that was very ill at some stage, and we were trying to find a cure for what ailed him. And I had the blessing to meet a very knowledgeable Tai Chi practitioner. And, you know, he noticed my hands, and because I had fairly big knuckles at those days, he sort of tweaked the fact that I was a martial arts practitioner, and we had some very long and involved discussions. And him coming from Tai Chi, which is a very soft style, gave me some insights into balance. It gave me some insight into meditation, gave me some insights into how they use their healing system, how they use their energy system. And to me, that was a very enlightening experience, one that I've incorporated in my teaching and my life's practices, because one of the obvious, when you look at our style, it's obvious to see that it's a very effective and hard style. But what is not quite so obvious is the softer side of it. It's always been there. Mas Oyama himself always said that the main purpose of the style was to better yourself in all areas, to make you the best possible you. And the best possible you, if you delve into it, is not just a powerful gorilla that can hit things hard. You know, the best possible you is a balanced individual. And this is essential for people to understand that there needs to be a balance between the hard and the soft. And the soft part of the martial arts is definitely involved in the breathing aspect, the meditational aspect, and the energy aspect. A lot of our dis-ease in life comes from blocked energy points. If you look at quantum physics as an example, which was the science that we're currently embracing, or hopefully currently embracing, that was discovered in the mid-20s, it validates the things that martial arts have been saying for years. So martial arts, in terms of Japanese martial arts, have stressed the existence and the importance of ki. Chinese martial arts have stressed and acknowledged the importance of qi, which is the same thing, the internal energies that are connected to our breathing and our existence as a whole. So quantum energy has finally caught up to that, what the Oriental martial arts has been teaching for a very long period of time, is that there is an energy force in the universe that is what we are all made of, what the entire universe is made of, and it vibrates at certain frequencies, and the frequencies it vibrates at dictate whether or not how solid it is and the effects it has. So things vibrating slowly are solid, like a piece of wood, and a few octaves higher at our bodies, and etc. and so forth. So the long and short of it is we're all energy and light vibrating at different levels. And this is influenced, apparently, by our observation and thoughts on tests they've done. So what that tells us, we have control of our substance. We have what we see, feel, and do controls the rest of the universe, and we're controlled by it as well. So basically that is the same thing as chi and ki, and there is some scientific validation of that. What that means to us is simply that what we believe to be true, we are creating in our reality. So getting back to our one of our original points, we're the makers of our own destiny. We control who we are. We are sovereign individuals. So we don't need to be a victim. We can be strong. We can be confident. And I think martial arts are a very, very good vehicle to bring that out on us. I hope I'm not waffling on too much here, Daniel.
No, that's those points that you make are really quite profound points. And for me personally, with that journey of understanding who and what you are through, particularly initially through the martial arts, it's quite profound. It's quite life-changing when you understand how to work with yourself, how to work with your emotions, like you said, how to be a more confident, stronger person. And essentially, you are changing yourself and you are, as you said, in charge of your reality. Do you have any, I suppose, just maybe quick practical tips around how people can begin to work with their subtle energy, or how they can begin, to work with meditation type practice?
Yep. In terms of working with this energy, breathing and meditation are a big part of it. So one of the things that the Oriental masters say is you should breathe through the toes, or when you're seated and see the meditation, breathe down into the bottom of your stomach. So this is not possible, of course. But the point they're trying to make is it's not just your breath you're taking through, it's your ki or your energy that's circulating through the body. So one of the examples I would use when I teach meditation and breathing at the end of the class, it is not just breath coming through, it is actually energy coming through your body. So I tell my students to breathe through the nose to a count of 3 seconds. So you're breathing it in. I tell them to take that energy or breath as low as they can. If they're seated, tell them to take it to their tandem. If they're standing, I tell them to take it to their toes. So basically it's just energy, visualize golden energy coming through with their breath to those points. Then for 6 seconds, I'll get them to circulate that energy in their tandem or stomach region. So this is a cleansing process. And then for 9 seconds, I get them to slowly breathe out. And the analogy I use, if a butterfly is sitting on your lip, don't disturb them with your breath. So for a period of 9 seconds roughly, I'll get them to breathe out. And this expels all the negative accumulation in your body from hard training and the days episodes that might have upset you. You had a hard day at school, or you had a bad day at work, or whatever. You need to get rid of that in your system. So before they leave class, I want them to A, recover from the hard training, and B, feel better about themselves and better about their world by getting rid of any negatives they've experienced to that day. So this is something a teacher can do in class. So this type of breathing is called universal breathing. All right. So the cleansing mechanism, again, your breath comes through the nose for 3 seconds. Take the breath as hard as you can. Get a bellows-like effect in your stomach where it's circulating for a count of 6 seconds, and then slowly comes out through the mouth. Now, in class, time is limited, so I do this 3 times, but if you're doing for your own training, you can do it longer. I also use this in my personal training, so I like to meditate, 15 to 20 minutes in the mornings, and also like to meditate outside and go through these breathing systems. I think a good connection with nature is a great thing. In other words, I like to go out in bare feet and do some sun gazing, which is not for all people, but basically you get energy from the sun. if you have bare feet, you get energy from Mother Earth, and this circulates and cleans your body. And like I said, this is part of the yin part. Unless you actually practice and experience this type of thing, it will sound a little bit airy-fairy and esoteric to you. Once, like everything, you practice this, delve into it, and experience it, you will understand the value of it. You can get energy from the earth as well, from Mother Earth. So, for instance, if you go on a walk or do standing meditation outside and your palms are facing the ground, after a period of time, you will feel energy coming up from the ground. Now, generally, males will feel that through their left palm. Females will feel it through their right palm. I don't know why that is, but that tends to be the way it is. But you can actually feel this energy. If you do work with the energy for a long period of time, you can feel it quite easily, and you can feel the benefits going around your body. So, a lot of Chinese medicine uses this type of energy. If you have blockages in your systems, they've got certain charts which, they will unblock these blockages and go through the health. So this is part of Chinese martial arts, and it's also part of Japanese martial arts, although they don't teach it as much. I remember Nishida Shihan, for instance, he graded myself to 5th Dan. One of the things he was doing was some sun gazing and meditation outside. So he was in a Kyudachi stance, and he had the Kanku symbol, and he was looking into the sun through that early in the morning. So the benefits of that are the Kanku can also be described, if you use visualization, as a pyramid. And the pyramid is a storage point for energy and power. So he was basically recharging his own energy systems or his own battery at the start of the day. This is also something that I'm interested in, I do, and I find it quite beneficial. You can feel the energy from the sun very, very strongly. So this is something, if you're new to it, you need to do it very early in the morning, because the sun can damage your eyes. So after a while, you find your tolerance builds up, like most things. But this is a very interesting thing as well. I actually teach it to some extent, or at least point my students in that direction, because it saves a lot of time. Some of the higher ranked Japanese know of it, but for some reason don't teach it. I don't know if it's because they think it's too airy-fairy for people, or maybe it's a language barrier or whatever, but I have seen some of them practice this type of thing, whereas none of them have actually gone and taught it formally. So in my teachings, I try and point people in certain directions. Whether or not they choose to explore it is completely up to themselves. But so getting back to the original point, this is a very important part of your martial arts, and something that I do myself to balance it. Having said that, every day I will also do push-ups, squats, push weights, do my basics, and use a lot of farmer's strength. I've got lucky enough to have a few acres, so I'm chopping wood in winter, I'm moving things. So getting back to the balance, I don't do one and neglect the other. As best as my 68-year-old body will allow, I try and keep both sides of the spectrum covered.
Really awesome there, Shihan, what you've talked about with the subtle energy. And again, personally for myself, from a recovery point of view and from a more sort of fatigue point of view, the stuff that I'd gone through with health issues in the past, learning how to work with that subtle energy and learning how to work with that softer side of the martial arts for not only getting energy, but also for your recovery and repair, for me has been really fundamental and really paramount. And I think, like you said, it's one of those things when people hear about these things, if they've never tried it, if they've never done a Tai Chi class or a Qigong class or something like that, it does sound a little bit airy-fairy. But once you do it, and even, you don't even have to practice it say you're just a beginner in your practice, you've only been doing it for a few weeks or a few months or something like that, you really can get a sense of feeling this subtle energy flow through your body. So, yeah, I think it's really quite profound and important part of our martial arts practice particularly. But then I think almost, for everyone else, just from a stress management point of view, from a recovery and a mental health point of view, I think it really does have so many benefits. So So if we could just talk a little bit about why you believe the traditional side of martial arts practice is really important, such as techniques such as our standing basics, where we're standing. We're working on our ki, which is, for anyone outside of the martial arts, where the ki is the shout, you're letting out the noise and with some energy as you're striking your technique. If you could talk a little bit about the importance of that, and then also why is ki important in and of itself?
Yep, no problems. Okay, so moving on to the more traditional aspects and why we do things as we do, I can really understand this. When I was growing up, I had some friends who were boxers, and they watched a class, and they loved the sparring sort of it, but they couldn't understand why we were standing there and why we threw the punches as we did, and why basically they couldn't understand why we practiced the basics as we did. And I think that that's really understandable, but people need to understand that what karate, what my interpretation of karate is at a very basic level. So the reason we do basics out of traditional stances and the way we practice with the hikate and while we employ ki, or my understanding is that karate is more, initially was not designed for tournaments. So tournaments, and especially the contact tournaments we practice, are an offshoot that really wasn't related to what we originally did. So it's traditional karate really relates to self-defense very much. So if you go back to some of the original thoughts behind it, was a lot of it was somebody was grabbing you or you were grabbing somebody. So if you look how a punch is set up, you've got force going out with one hand and force coming back with the other, and those forces are equivalent. So are you going back to the balance aspect? There's a balance on both sides, and it's a balance going forward and a balance going back. How does that relate to your punch? Okay, if somebody grabs my left hand, I pull that back as fast and as hard as I can, releasing that grip, and with my right hand at the same time I do a strike to that person. Now that strike can be to the body, to the face, or to a joint if I simply want to use it as a releasing technique. So there is the defensive application there and the energy application there. The blocking part of it would be more of a case of am I using the block to do damage, or am I using the block to deflect? So if you're using a block simply to deflect, you'd use a one-beat movement, which would simply be a slap aside of a technique, because that's the fastest way to do it. Every time you have a fist, you're using that block to damage or strike. So my interpretation of that block would be, I would be grabbing you with one hand and hitting you with the other. Now it could be the upper block could be a strike to your throat. It could be a strike to a limb that was trying to hit me. It could be a strike to an elbow in an outside block. To the side, it could be a releasing technique and a simultaneous strike. So all of these so-called blocking techniques are designed to do damage. And again, it's a defensive mechanism against somebody either grabbing you or you're grabbing and pulling somebody in and hitting at the same time. So why do we practice out of Sanshin, for instance? Well, Sanshin is it's a very interesting stance. It allows you to generate a great deal of force without using much distance. So a street fighter, any mug on the street can, if they've got enough distance, can swing their arm, put their body behind it, and create force. A martial artist should be able to create force from 6 inches away, and they do that by dropping into Sanshin, which creates a triangle. So there's a distribution of your weight in such a way that you've got a very strong base. If you're barefooted, you can even grip into the ground like we're doing to the dojo and strengthen our toes at the same time. But basically, you're dropping your weight into an area of stability, and through the rotation of your hips and the use and twisting of the torso, you're able to generate a lot of force in close. So this is a particular skill you're building up. Now, I've had many comments from boxers I've trained with that are amazed by the power we can generate in our punches, and I believe this is through our use of Sanshin Dachi and the way we practice our techniques. So although I can understand why a boxer, as an example, would question how we train, there is a reason for it and there is an explanation for it. It's a matter of knowing what those reasons are and knowing what those explanations are. And a good instructor should be able to convey this information to their students so they understand why they are doing this rather than just hitting a pad and training for a tournament. Now, tournaments are a fantastic thing, but you need to get the balance right, all right? And so in a certain stage of your life, the balance may be very much focused on that. And that's a great thing because you'll pick up some fantastic skills out of it, but it's not the be-all and end-all of karate. And it's also, unfortunately, resulted in a lessening of some of the other techniques that we used to practice in terms of grappling, sweeping, throwing, and joint locks, which were actually employed in early karate training. So for instance, when I was competing, foot sweeps and throws were part of it. And we also paid a fair bit of attention to basic arm locks and basic strangles in my early training. And they're still part, if you dissect some of our katas, they're still part of our systems today. Are they practiced a lot? Probably not in most cases. And unfortunately, the result of that can be people not knowing they exist down the track. So your style can be diluted. So I think as instructors, we have a responsibility, A, to realise that it's part of our system, and B, to give some attention to it as well. So, a lot of the kata will have throwing, joint locking, and escaping techniques. So on the surface, it appears like just kicks and punches, but if you really break them down, you'll see there's a whole lot more to that, and a lot of that involves your own exploration in that field as well, because everybody's karate is different. We've all got different mindsets, we've all got different bodies, so we've all got different backgrounds. The Mas Oyama, for instance, he was also a fourth dan in judo, so he had a very, very strong understanding of grappling in his makeup and in his karate as well. So that changed when tournaments came out because everybody wanted to be all Japan champion or Australian champion or world champion, and all the young guys sort of just focused on that. But the early karate was significantly different in its emphasis to what is practiced today. So, I'm not saying one's worse or one's better. I'm just saying that's the way it is. And so you will have different levels of understanding from different generations of people as well. Getting to the ki. Ki is very important. It's It is a melding of your energy. So the Japanese translation is roughly spirit shout. So the ki is where your physical aspect, your breath, your energy, and your intention all meet. So the apex of the ki is not just the physical aspect, but the metaphysical aspect, and the breath and everything comes together to give your utmost to a technique. So especially in kata, where the ki is limited, this is a real good focus of your energies, or of your intent, of your purpose. So that's the purpose of it. But if you look, it's not really restricted to martial arts. I've watched some of the tennis players, and they ki when they deliver their shots. The expulsion of breath from a boxer when they deliver their strike. The extended ki that a judoka might employ, for instance, when he's employing a throw. It's a longer one than ours, but it still does that particular job. They just perform it slightly different. So the old man or woman getting out of bed, and their exaltation as they're getting enough energy to get out of a deep chair or breath is a form of ki, because they're just gathering their energies to accomplish that particular exercise or job that they're undertaking. So it's an integral part of our life, and we're in karate, as an example, we're formalizing it and putting some thought behind what it actually is. And so it's more, I guess, elaborate and focused, but it's certainly an integral part of what we do.
Thank you, Shihan. I know you've talked about this a little bit in the last camp that we attended together, and I thought this is a really nice way of breaking down. But you talked a little bit about learning a new skill and how we each, as individuals, go about learning a new skill. So, for example, some people will really visualize themselves doing it. Some people will really feel themselves doing it. And you talked about utilizing all of our senses to essentially help us learn a new skill, or how to learn how to move better. If you could just touch on that concept for the listeners, that'd be awesome.
Okay, so basically, we've all got different ways or preferential ways of gathering information and learning things. So some people are very visually orientated. So they see and they process information in that fashion. So their method of learning it, they will watch a demonstration, and they will see themselves doing it in their head and get it right that way. Other people will listen, and they'll talk themselves through it, and that's their way of their way of learning. Other people will get a real feeling for something. Their best way of learning is just internalizing it. And you can spot these people when they start to close their eyes in class. So as an instructor, which is, I guess, where you are now, and where a lot of us at, you've got to make sure that you're catering to all these people. So get their attention first of all, and listen up and watch. So you've covered the people that hear, you've got their attention. Watch, that's a key word for people that visually interpret things. And then you tell them, now feel yourself doing this. So you've covered 3 basic learning aspects that will get people's attention. Then as you're going through your routine, you'll physically demonstrate how it's done. We'll try and explain to them how it feels to do this particular exercise, and make sure you listen to this, so that the people that are hearing orientated, you've got their attention, and they'll talk their way through. So after a while, this will become second nature to you, So, but these are I'm not saying they're the only 3, but the 3 main ways that people will learn and assimilate information. If you can engage all 3 of these senses simultaneously, of course, and then then A, you'll cover the majority of your class, and B, by employing all three methods, you will hopefully get people to learn things faster. Also, you need to use voice modulation, because if somebody's telling you an extremely boring story in a monotone voice, you'll switch off really, really fast. So if you're trying to impart information, you've got to try and make it interesting and exciting. So you vary the modulation of your voice. You will use dynamic or soft movements as befits what you're trying to teach, and hopefully throw a few applications and examples in there. So this is the method. I'm not saying it's the best. This is the method that I try and use when imparting information. Also, positive reinforcement is essential. Of course, you got to correct people when they're doing it wrong, but minimize the fact that an individual is doing it. If you're gonna correct, try and correct generally, so nobody, I guess, is felt to be less than, and also try and minimize the if you do individualize, try and minimize the importance. Put it in such a way, look, that's really good, but maybe if we just slightly modified, you nearly got it. But so especially with kids and with girls, and this is one of my most massive mistakes when I was teaching earlier on. I still get caught with it now, especially girls, little girls. If I correct them, sometimes I'll forget myself, and they start to cry on you, and you feel terrible. Like I'm a grandfather. That's the last thing that I want to do. But the point I'm trying to make as an instructor, you've also got to live in the moment, and you've got to have your act together. So when you're imparting information, look at your target audience and try not to make the little girl cry. So it's different if you're teaching, a class of 25-year-old gorillas that is full of testosterone, but then it is to teach a mixed class with a wide variety of age groups and genders and sensitivities. So you've got to be very much switched on to who's there and who you're trying to impart the information to. So, in the same grouping, if you're taking a tournament class with all tough fighters, your approach, of course, will be significantly different, because you're trying to get a different result out of a different target audience. So, these are the challenges and skill sets that an instructor needs to have to get the point across. And of course, this is a bit of a juggling act in a mixed class, but it's a good challenge for us and keeps us on the ball as instructors as well.
Yep, beautiful.
I think that. Can you hear me there, Matt? Or?
Yep, all good.
Yeah,
all good.
Yeah.
So,
is that all you were asking? Have I answered your question or not?
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. So I think those points that you just made then, Shihan, were really, again, quite powerful, regardless of whether you're a student and you're thinking about how can I better learn something in any avenue, whether it's in sports.
You're breaking up a bit on me there, Daniel.
So what I was saying there was, really important points that you just made, whether it is that you're a student or whether it is that you're a teacher, we've got to understand ourselves about how we learn. And then, as you said, how we can impart that wisdom to other people. Just going back quickly to a point that you made earlier. So you've talked a lot about, your history in martial arts and your exposure to how the karate was in your earlier days. Mm-hmm. Do you sort of believe that each of us that are practicing like a modern day karate at the moment, that we should go back and practice a bit of grappling and practice a bit of boxing and these sorts of things?
Oh, look, I do 100%. One of the early motivations in my personal training, I spent 10 years as a karate instructor. So I was taken on as a full-time student at Brown Belt. So it's one of the original Taipei tradition in Australia, in as much as being a full-time student than a full-time teacher and doing it as an apprenticeship. My early method of making a living, although, being a karate teacher at that age is absolutely fantastic. I got married fairly early too, and karate didn't pay the bills very well. So as a consequence of that, one of the ways that I supplemented my income, because I couldn't do it during the day, was working as a hotel bouncer. So this had a fairly significant impact on my training, because I was training to deal with a certain element in society in certain circumstances. So the hotels I worked at, the ones that paid best were the rougher ones. So I learned, personally, it wasn't my environment. I drank very little, and I didn't smoke, and so it wasn't my environment of preference, but it was my environment to make a reasonably good amount of money in a fairly short time. And I was exposed to, during those years, 18 years, to boxers, street fighters, and a variety of people in the poorer parts of town who were quite accustomed to, if they couldn't find a girl that night, the second best result for them was to get in a fight, because they'd have something to talk about the next day. So I'm not judging them for this. I'm just explaining the circumstances that my karate was pointed in a certain direction. And back in those early days, that direction was covered very admirably, because I was fortunate enough that my background was in judo, first martial art. My owner of our school was a big Dutchman who was a judo jiu-jitsu exponent, and my karate instructor, Brian Cole, who had a profound influence on me in many ways, but he was also a good amateur boxer. So I was fortunate enough to also have a friend who was a very good boxer. So I had a very good, rounded experience in my martial arts. And although, for instance, a lot of the grappling would have been covered in karate, I didn't know enough about it, my karate at that stage, to take full advantage of it. Although we taught sweeps and takedowns and locks in our karate as basic training, because this is the way we fought. We also fought with controlled head punches. The addition of boxing and the judo grappling and throws and jiu-jitsu grappling and throws that I was training with concurrently worked very, very well in my favour, and they worked very, very well in my dealing with the people I was dealing with in my second job. So cross-training is a marvellous thing. I think it's extremely helpful. I think a lot of the things we have in our karate syllabus, that in terms of grappling and throwing, but it's not practiced a lot. So if you go and train with people who specialise in these things, your development will certainly be faster. So I know my early training was helped by my training with boxers and judoka and jiu-jitsu exponents, undoubtedly. I've been a passionate trainer of weights for all my life. Now things have changed now, because although the muscles are still very, for my age, very good, the joints not so. The muscles can still push the weights, but there's a lot of pain in the joints and the knee joints and the elbow joints and the shoulder joints, which make me modify how heavy I lift the weights. But I still do weights 2 to 3 times a week, and I use a lot of body weight training in my push-ups and my squats and so forth. So I do believe that you will be most successful if you have one core system, whatever that might be. It might be a striking system like karate or boxing that is your core passion for want of a better word. And it's good to pick one that has a future in it. If you only pick an art, for instance, that's relevant for 10 or 20 years, that you're young and strong, then you'll probably end up giving it away. Whereas if you pick something like karate, which is a lifetime thing, and it's a lifetime passion, and it's a lifetime value, a lifetime of value. It's a lifestyle. Then that keeps going. And if you add boxing, if you add some specialized grappling to it, if you add weights to it, if you add perhaps a running program, if you're that way inclined, or in my case, cycling program, then these are all become part of your karate. They're no longer separate, because it's what you do, and that'll be Peter Volke's karate, or Daniel's karate, or whoever's karate. It'll become part of that system, because you'll find, especially as you teach, that the cross training you've done is now part of your karate, and you'll incorporate that in your teaching. I've certainly incorporated a lot of my throwing and joint locks from my early judo days, and in my sparring and bag work, I'll incorporate a lot of my boxing. I'll add things like hammer fists, and elbow strikes from the karate into that bag work, but a lot of it is certainly boxing. Karate will augment it too. I think there's striking aspects that karate does better than anybody, and especially our ability to generate a lot of force close in. I don't think boxing does that anywhere near as well as we do. So there's going to be a lot of crossovers and things, and nobody's body's the same, nobody's thinking's the same. So we'll all have different preferences. And things like Tai Chi practice and meditation and energy work for me certainly help me in balancing things out, and that's become part of my karate now as well. It's indistinguishable. All the things I do now are indistinguishable from karate, because the karate has been my core passion, my core system, and everything else I add on to that. The weightlifting is now part of my karate, and the things you do, they'll be part of your karate and part of what you do. So I think it's very valid to cross-train and just incorporate that into what you do.
Awesome. Yeah, that's some really awesome points that you made there. That's really cool. And I think, again, the value of cross-training is, you can take someone else's perspective on it and say, how does the boxer, how do they think about throwing a punch, or how do they think about body rotation, or any principle? I think it just makes you a more well-rounded practitioner. So that's some really awesome points you made there. So just a few more questions. We'll try and wrap it up maybe in the next 10 to 15 minutes. Sure. Next question, what have you changed your mind on over your career as a martial artist? And what would you say is the most important lesson that you've learned?
Okay. Yeah. Things I've changed my mind on. I think cut people a lot more slack. You've got to... when I was younger, I was very hard on myself and very hard on other people in terms of perhaps being a little bit of judgmental. Things were very black and white in my teaching, and I was very much hard style in myself and how I taught. I think just be kinder to others and be kinder to yourself, and you'll get a better result. Not everybody sees things the way you do, and not everybody can do what you do. Conversely, there's a lot of things that other people can teach you. So if you live in the moment, and if you're a bit more open-minded and not as hard on others and yourself. So when I say being judgmental, I think that the first person you've got to stop being judgmental to is yourself. I think we're all very much too hard on ourselves. So we're doing our best. Other people are doing their best. So cut yourself and other people a lot of slack. So if I go back in time when I was 18-year-old, I would say that just be gentler on yourself, be gentler on others, and remember to live in the moment. You can't change things of the past. What's happened has happened. As far as your future goes, you've got no idea what that's going to be. You don't even know if you're going to have one. So just enjoy the moment as it happens, and you'll get more out of life. And just be prepared to accept people as they are, enjoy them as they are, celebrate their differences. As long as they're not hurting anybody, people are fine. Just accept that there's going to be different views, and that's cool, and that's the way it should be. And if you make a blue yourself or cut yourself a little bit of slack, you're doing the best you can.
Awesome. Yeah, that's again, that's some powerful life advice, and that ties into the next question that we had. That was, what would you tell your 18-year-old self? And you've touched on that, which is really awesome. So next question that we've got for you, we're nearly there. So who are the 3 most influential people in your life, and why?
3 most influential people in your life. I think in my case, probably the parents are going to be the most influential, because they're the ones you spent time with, and they're the ones that you've inherited genetics with. And I'm a firm believer in past lives, and that things get passed through generations. So I think that there's a certain history that you accumulate in your incarnations, and I think they have a profound effect on you, consciously or unconsciously. So there's a certain starting point you're stuck with, both the good and the bad, that will affect you. Some of the things you'll consciously see and say, well, I'm not going to go in that direction because of this reason or that reason. And there's other things that you will go with because you agree with them. So you've got a certain starting point that we all have, which is one of genetics and one of whoever brought you up in early life. They're going to have a very profound effect on you. So I'd have to say the 2 most profound effects would be from my parents, both genetically and culturally. The next one up, I'd say my karate instructor, Brian Cohen. He was a good karate man, but more importantly, he was a good man. I met him in a stage of my life when I was a young teenager, and he was a really, really good role model in a lot of ways. He was my version of what you'd call a gentleman, and I would be very hard pressed, even now looking back, to find something that was negative about him. He was just an extremely good role model. He was a barrel-chested, have-a-go type of guy, but he was very gentle with those who weren't up to his standard. And look, he's a really hard man. I remember, especially in my early 20s, I towered over him from height, and I was probably between 95 and 100 kilo of muscle, because I trained pretty hard in those days, but he still handled me comfortably. That changed later down the track, as things do, when he aged a bit and I reached my straps. But that's a natural consequence of life, which we all go through. You're going to have your certain period where you're on top and you're feeling good, and that's going to change. But his character was, I believe, exceptional. And looking back on it, I think I've tried to emulate a lot of his habits and what he taught me. So if, in terms of being a role model, I'd say that he would have been my role model, and I'm very, very, very grateful to him and for what he's taught me. More the being a good man part than being a karateka part. I think that's the karateka part is nice, but the good man part is essential, and I think that's what he taught me.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. That's really, really quite profound. And I think a lot of the times, we don't realize the impact that a martial arts or any kind of sport that you're really into has on your life, but then also the impact that you can have on other people's lives. And I know sort of just what you've explained in your original karate teacher there as well. I think a lot of people pick that up from you as well. pick that up in the regard that, you display, you express so many admirable qualities in and of yourself. So, yeah, I think it's really quite powerful, that role of the martial arts teacher and just how much they can change their students' lives without them necessarily knowing it. So a few last kind of quick couple of questions. Any favorite books or podcasts that you'd recommend?
Yeah, well, going back, Mas Oyama put out a very good book, Vital Karate. So every student in the dojo got when we started, and I found that a really good handbook that taught me a lot very fast. So I'd have to say Vital Karate, in my estimation, was a good one. Later on down the track, Advanced Karate, put out by Mas Oyama, was also a great book because I learned all my higher kata there for, second, third, fourth, and so forth out of that particular book. So that was a great help to me. Budo Karate by Shihan Cameron Quinn. I think that's a great book as well. Shihan Fitkin's current kata book, Kyokushin Karate, is brilliant. He's a very knowledgeable guy and very knowledgeable master. I've had the privilege of training both with Shihan Fitkin and Shihan Collins, and they're both very knowledgeable men. Both their books are excellent. Shihan Collins also in his historical insights he has in there, and Shihan Fitkin's in his kata one, and Sam Gilbert's for the technically minded. The Science of Striking is a very good book. If you have a technical and scientific bent to your nature, you'll get a lot out of this book as well. I think all these books have a lot of value in different areas, and I found them really good. The only sort of podcast that I've personally listened to would be Sensei Pat Pinto's podcast, and I find him a great guy, and his podcast he interviews some interesting martial artists there. So I guess that's great too, and probably add you to that list now. You seem to be heading in that direction, and more power to people like you who are using the new technologies to spread the message. I think that's a very important thing. My generation was, I guess, more book orientated, and I probably won't change that too much. I still love reading my books, and I use technology to some extent, but I probably struggle with it a little bit in some areas. So books will always be my first go-to. But that's more cultural, and that's more the past. So guys like yourself, Senpai Daniel, more power to you. You're doing a great job, and you're getting the message out there, just like Sensei Pat is, and you're spreading the gospel as far as I'm concerned. So that's a great thing.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you very much for that, Shihan Peter. Much appreciated. And again, I think that I agree with you. That I still go back to the books as well. I do consume a lot of online information, but the power of a book, someone's put all their knowledge into something, and then it's been proofread and edited. So that what you're picking up is generally going to be something of a pretty high quality. Awesome. So once again, we'll just sort of do a quick finish up now. Is there anything else you'd like to say? And then also, where can people find you online if they want to get in touch with you or get in contact with you?
Okay, to get in touch with me, I don't do Facebook and that sort of thing very often. Occasionally I'll flick through it. I did spend a little bit of time on it, but I found I have an addictive personality, and it was taking up more time than I wanted to at lots. So I tend to be an all or nothing sort of guy, so it tends to be pretty much nothing. If you want to get in touch with me, it's email's probably the best, which is tamashi@bigpond, which is .com. TAMASHII @bigpond.com. So we can move on from there. It's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me. Thank you very much for having me on your podcast, and I enjoyed giving this presentation. It was great to sort of analyse, I guess, what I do and how I do it. Sometimes you just take things for granted, and you take people for granted a little bit sometimes, and you don't analyse it, but it gives you a chance to reflect on things, and gave me a chance to have a bit of a reflection on my history in my life, which is nice to do every now and then. So I thank you for that, and I thank you for doing the work you're doing, and more power and more strength to you. Enjoy your training, enjoy your life, mate.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time, Shihan Peter. I'm sure this conversation, all the messages and all the stuff we talked about today will go a long way in helping a lot of people, and that's the aim, the ultimate aim of all this anyway. So thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. You take care. It was...
Thanks.